Namaste and welcome to yet another edition of News 18 presents Yuva Bharat in association with IIMUN. And at a time when we see a neighboring nation, a country like Afghanistan, in so much of strife, a relevant question: what is the UN doing? What are the bodies that are supposed to be governing the world doing? Where were they when the Rohingya crisis happened? Where were they when Syria happened? And now where are they when Afghanistan happened? 75 years down the line, are these institutions even relevant? These are questions, very, very burning issues. And we have a very august panel today, along with some young students from IIMUN, the president of IIMUN, Rishabh, with us. And so are Yash and Gomti, students. And good to have you, but also welcome and namaste to Ambassador Anil Tribuniyat and Dr. Aditya Bhan uh, from Gateway House. He's also the associate professor at Gateway House Film Policy Lab. Thank you very, very much. And I think it's a burning question, and everybody will have their points of view. But Rishabh, take it forward.
No, firstly, I want to thank you for doing this because putting together a show on national television, discussing issues that are pertinent to young people, and that's something that you've done. So, really grateful for that. And so, also for this topic, because being earlier an admirer of what the UN used to do, and then over a period of time, kind of figuring it out as to what the UN actually is doing. Like a couple of examples, and then I'll come to the ambassador first. Is 85% of historic Israel is historic Palestine is now a part of Israel. You've got the Srebrenica massacre that took place, the Rwanda genocide, Kosovo. So many examples that I can give again and again. Um, the issue with the UN is that there are permanent five, and these permanent five, whenever there's something that goes wrong, you've got 293 vetoes that come about. Ambassador, over a period of years, I've come to realize that the UN is in fact a sadder version of a model UN. A model UN may probably come up with solutions and resolutions, but the UN in actuality cannot pass any solution. Do you think multilateral organizations like the UN, um, their time has come? Because we're seeing what we're seeing with Afghanistan, what we're seeing in the area is something that the UN has failed to take notice of, cognizance of, and even today they're not doing anything about it. So do you think it's high time that we move away from institutions such as the UN, ambassador?
Actually, coming from you, Rishabh, is a bit sad for me because I've been associated with you for the IMAN. And as a diplomat, as you know, that the hope is the last thing that you always pulled out. So I will not write off the United Nations or multilateral institutions. In fact, in today's global politics, the multilateral institutions and multilateralism are the only way forward. Because no country, as we have seen in Afghanistan with the US and the NATO, can by themselves move things around. So at the end of the day, even though these big countries or P5 countries who dictate the narratives within the UN or what, as long as it does not affect them, these go through. There will be United Nations Security Council resolutions and other things that will happen. But the moment it is directly impacting them, then you will see that either there is no resolution, or in the worst case scenario, there will be some kind of a veto that will be used, or internally they do.
But Ambassador, don't get me wrong. I'm not against multilateralism as a concept as much as the United Nations and its working systems. You got 45 billion US dollars that are given to the UN from 2013-14. We've done our events at the UN itself, and I've seen that there is very little that comes to to the ground. And when you talk about the Rohingya Muslims or even the Uyghur Muslim situation in China, the UN is not doing anything. So my problem is, as young people, and I'm very hopeful, but I'm hopeful of multilateralism 3.0 and not multilateralism in the way it used to take place, where, with no disrespect, where in a fancy building in New York, there are people who are discussing an issue in Afghanistan without actually understanding what is going on ground. So, sir, I'm not against multilateralism. I'm just saying that shouldn't the UN be reformed, and shouldn't there be a more active?
Definitely, that's what I was saying, that today's UN is still, after 75 years, continue to reflect what it was in 1945. The same kind of powers are there, same kind of things are there. So that is why I feel that reform of the UN is absolutely a must. There is no
reform diluted. Again, sorry to interrupt, but reform has not taken place. And from 1993, I've seen, Ambassador Prakash Shah led the negotiations in the UN, and nothing's happened ever since. Let me come to Dr. Aditya. Do you think that the UN not being reformed, is it time that we move forward from institutions, global institutions such as the UN, and then move to people ties, which is the new form of multilateralism that young people are looking forward to? That, the people ties are saving, they're saving grace for both Afghanistan and people world over. And then, and in this, there are 600 million young people who are ready to do things for Afghanistan, vis-a-vis 193 countries that are yet in deadlock about what to do about Afghanistan. Dr. Aditya, I'm sorry, I'm very passionate about this issue because I've seen the UN fail more number of times than it succeeded.
Yes.
I think, beautiful question, very important question, right? And, before I come to the answer, I think, thank you for having me on this panel. I think it's very exciting to be amongst, young folks who are passionate on these issues, right? And I would imagine I'm not too old myself, maybe. So, well, I think a good amount of, as you mentioned, a good amount of capital, and I'm not just talking about money, has been invested by different countries, developed and developing, right? In accordance with their stature, behind the existing multilateral institutions. Of course, UN being, at the center of it. The idea is it time to forego the UN? I believe not, despite its imperfections. We might decide that we might want to have alternatives to the UN to discuss certain issues, right? So whether these are geopolitical issues, whether they are people issues, issues involving forced migration, refugee issues, climate issues, we can of course have multiple fora in which to discuss these things, right? Of course, there is always a healthy space for bilateral discussions also on each one of these issues with between two countries, etc., and at different levels. Having said that, of course, multilateral fora will continue to rule the roost, and within that, UN, as a body, continues to hold and will continue, in my view, will continue to hold a very important place. Of course, it will not hold monopoly ideally, and I think that monopoly already has crumbled to an extent. So, which is a good thing, I think. We are having multiple other fora to discuss many issues.
Reiterating, everybody said just the bits and pieces of it. Do we need the UN? Yes. Do we need the reform? No. We need a rehaul. We don't need the UN the way it is, but we need the UN the way we want it to be. For instance, the SC should be there, but should the SC have a veto power? I don't think so. I mean, this is not gully cricket where the person who has the bat is the person who's making the decision. We need an overwhelming majority out there. To add to it, do we need diplomacy and do we need personal connections? Yes, we do. And I guess that is the reason why William Burns from CIA is able to hold a meeting with Mullah Baradar from Taliban. But at the same time, UN, an amalgamation of 193 countries, is not able to do that. Why is that possible? Is it because William Burns is having coffee with Mullah Baradar? I don't think so. But is it because that these guys have personal motives that they want to push forward? Yes, they have. And if every country comes together to form a personal motive, which is to provide peace, why not have a 193 country forum meet Taliban in New York or Geneva, and then let's hope that the crisis is solved soon.
But the fact is that if there were 193 countries who had a say, then they wouldn't have had Taliban running roughshod all over Afghanistan. So that is another angle and aspect which we would come to in just a bit. But Gomti, your thoughts?
So again, my question here is how relevant is the United Nations in today's world and how close it is to becoming the new League of Nations? Because the United Nations, again, has never been successful in resolving a conflict from the Israel-Palestine issue to the Syrian crisis. So is UN just truly uniting the world or just manifesting the idea? Because I think the problems have not been addressed in the way that they should have been. Because all the issues have always been considered a political issue. I see videos of people trying to flee Afghanistan, swarming the compounds and fences of airport. But at the same time, I also see videos of people in positions of power and influence appreciating the efforts of Taliban and backing them. So I think this is an issue that should have been addressed from the grassroots level. We all have our own values and beliefs and a right to them, but we live in a society where culture is the only source of validity for moral ethics and values. So I think it is important to address this challenge of intercultural clashes in our increasingly diverse and divided world, and that is one thing that UN has failed in.
Well, I think that UN, as whether you call it reforms or rehaul or start a new organization, you see, the problem is that the way it has been structured, and it has been structured in a way where there is a real politics take precedence of the good over the global good. And that has always been the case because these 5 countries, out of which 2 and 3 today, Russia and China on one hand, and the other 3 on the other, they are the ones who are dictating to everything. Now, Afghanistan, for example, if you look at it, it had nothing to do with the global this thing. This has been direct negotiations between the Americans and the Taliban, even for foregoing the government that they themselves had supported all these 20 years. So these are the kind of things that will happen, and we will also continue to see that, of course, India today is this month, fortunately, is chairing the UN Security Council, and we were able to call 2 meetings during a span of a week or 10 days, and we focused on the same issues, which whether you look at America, whether you look at G7, whether you look at Russia or China, everybody has been expressing those 3 or 4 concerns as far as Afghanistan. So that is where, because see, when you have, whether we like it or not, when you have 193 countries, when something comes from the UN Security Council, whether in the form of a UN Security Council resolution or in the form of a statement, it has a certain validity for 187 countries. I mean, that is what is important in that sense of the term.
But Ambassador, let me ask you, why should what has been decided with 5 nations sitting there with veto power be applicable to 187? But what the actions of those very nations they are not accountable for? Why is China not accountable for its actions? US not accountable for its actions? Whatever is being perpetrated in this region and across a lot of the global crisis, what is the implication? Now, let me ask a very layman question. Tomorrow, if there is a huge crisis in India, and Hindus in this country had to go to another nation, do you think any of the OICs will open their doors and say Hindus are all welcome?
No.
But now, a Muslim nation has perpetrated a crisis in another Muslim nation. When I say an Islamic nation has perpetrated a crisis in another Islamic nation, and non-Islamic nations have to open up their doors for the lakhs of refugees who are coming through. Same thing we saw with ISIS, with the Daesh crisis. Same thing we are seeing with the Afghanistan crisis.
The thing is that, again, like, this is the power game. I would call it Jungle Raj, frankly. If you have the power, if you are strong, you dictate the paradigm. I mean, it has happened during the Cold War 1.0, 2.0, everywhere. Today, China is really giving them a run to the Americans. So they are, despite the fact that whatever they may say, they're still talking to them. They are worried about Russia. They are worried. So there is this geopolitics which is playing out all the time. So if the Americans want to go and bomb the Libyans or want to bomb the Iraqis, they do so with impunity. But just to, if you remember that the US Foreign State Secretary of the State used to say that United Nations is an instrument of our foreign policy. So it is as simple as that.
So then is the UN nothing but a showpiece, Rishabh? Then for us as a nation and as people, should we then as youngsters not take the UN and not do these mock UN sessions at all? Because it's pointless, because it's nothing but a showpiece which is huge and big. It has to be acknowledged because it's there in the room, but it serves no purpose other than sitting there and looking pretty and making the room look good.
Anand very rightly identified, and which is the principal reason and the principal thing why we changed the name from Model UN to Movement to United Nations. Because at the end of the day, the UN has been unable to solve major world crises. It's funded by a few countries. As Ambassador Trigunyat himself said, the US at one point in time had acknowledged that the UN is but an instrument of their own foreign policy. They are unable to act when it comes to pressing issues around the subcontinent, and all the onus is on countries such as India. That's why in 2017, with late former President Pranab Mukherjee, we changed the name Model UN to Movement to United Nations, because I think young people should understand this, that the UN, like you rightly said, is an entity that must be recognized, but cannot be venerated, cannot be, should not be duplicated in institutions blindly, where the idea is that you replicate foreign policy that has been going on since eons and are unable to come on to a solution to any pressing world issue across, whether it be Israel, Palestine, whether it be Syria, whether it be Africa. All of these crises are going on and on. And the only solution to this is, if at a school level, if in colleges and schools, we stop venerating the UN and we start understanding that it is young people, and only young people, with the help of countries that are like-minded, that can bring about change. Which is why I said the time for the UN has gone. The time for a new era of multilateralism is here. And in that, country such as India, with its population, with its culture, with the fact that we are able to believe in the concept of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, will unite the world the Indian way. So I think that the time for the 5 superpowers has gone. The geopolitical reality has changed, and India does not look to dominate. India looks to unite in a manner which is going to, it's guiding and counseling countries. And I think that's what the next generation should see. So I'm very grateful once again that we're doing this.
But you know what, but you know what, Rishabh, what happens is, and I'm going to take this to Dr. Aditya Bhan. Look what we are trying to do. We're trying to get a permanent place in the UN Security Council, extend the number of permanent members in the UN Security Council. So then multiple nations are saying not only India, even they too, this too, that too. Even today, what we are seeing in terms of geopolitics is one of the 5 permanent members is trying to weaken the other. And there is a new definition of Cold War, but then they are all sitting there on the permanent seat of the UN Security Council. So why are we chasing the UN Security Council in the first place?
Why the UN? Well, I think, there's a certain principled argument which has been clearly articulated, already. I will not repeat that. I think, pertaining to how the UN has failed in many of its objectives, right? But I think, when we are acting as rational individual strategic players on the global chessboard, considerations pertaining to your own interests, right, sort of supersede a lot of things, right? And it also, there's another element to it, right? So on the one hand, there is the hedging element. So nobody wants to be caught on the wrong side of the tide. So for example, just a tiny example, you have Afghanistan, right? Everybody is hedging their bets. You name the side and they are hedging their bets. Some are doing it above the table, it's visible. Some are doing it, secretively. But everybody is trying to basically hedge their bets.
My simple net takeaway from this, Gomuti, and do you agree with me that we cannot trust anybody? So we have to become very, very strong so that people talk to us. So till the time we are strong, we are independent. We can't rely on anybody. I can't lean on the US. First, they left a nation where they invested more than $1 trillion in 20 years. They left that nation high and dry. They did the same with Iraq. They'll turn away the moment their ends are met. I can't trust China. I can't trust any of the other nations today. So I have to only trust myself.
So I completely agree with this, because I think even the topic of terrorism, the UN was largely silent on the topic of terrorism during the Cold War period, and they started their most prominent response only was imposing embargoes against countries due to the rise of state-sponsored terrorism that started affecting them. So I completely agree. Even the Security Council was urged by the Secretary General to stand together. But again, I see countries placing their national interests ahead of international peace and security. And again, the United Nations, the primary objective of United Nations to a large extent depends on the individual objectives of nations, because it is the member nations that makes the United Nations. So until there's a change in this, the United Nations reforms is not possible, is what I think.
Let me say something in their defense too, which they themselves say. I mean, for example, the peacekeeping operations. I mean, that is something that is a shining example for as far as, so they have been able to control several smaller conflicts in different parts of the world, and very, I would say, remarkably well. Secondly, in the 75 years, we have seen between League of Nations to the United Nations. Just one second. Yeah, okay. Come.
No, you said something about the peacekeeping forces, and I'm sorry, I wanted to come in. So they stand with a helmet. They stand with a helmet and a pistol. In Rwanda, 800,000 people died. There have been cases in Kosovo where they have been accused of numerous nefarious activities. And so the UNPKF is not a shining example.
The very major conflict, between the superpowers or major powers have also been averted. Maybe because of the balance of power, but also because they were able to come and sit there and argue it out, because a lot goes on behind the scenes in the UN Security Council itself. So I think that we have to grant that much.
Paying lip service will not cut it. We need to continuously invest in it. Other countries also, like-minded countries, need to be coaxed into investing into this process, despite low returns on investment, by the way. So, one can argue that, it might be a 15-year thing, 20-year thing, 25 years. In geopolitics, these time frames, by the way, are not very long. Generations disappear, interests don't change so quickly, normally, on the chessboard. So basically, nations outlive individuals very often. Interests will also outlive individuals very often.
We've run out of time, so I'm going to call it a wrap. Yash, Gomuti, Ambassador Anil Trigubniath, Dr. Aditya Bhan, and somewhere in the high hills, Rishabh Shah. Thank you very, very much. Great talking to you. And it's a good subject. We must take this forward and continue to engage on this. Thank you very much for joining us on this edition of News 18 Yuva Bharat. Thank you.
Thank you, Anand.